Welcome back to the channel, guys. So with Valentine's Day coming up, we're going to be doing something a little different, a little bit special to get everybody in the mood. We're going to be starting with this magnum of this sparkling rosé over here from Billecart-Salmon, and then moving on for our main course, we're going to be doing our 2017 Calon-Ségur. So let's get into it. All right, so here we have our Billecart-Salmon Brut Rose. Obviously, this is from the Champagne region of France. Everybody says can't be Champagne unless it's from the Champagne region of France. How many times have you heard that, right? This is the very northernmost winemaking region in France. Specifically, this wine is made in Mauriel-sur-Ailly, but the plots that this wine is coming from is from multiple regions and multiple different plots, right? The blend in this wine is going to be 40% Chardonnay. We're having 30% Pinot Noir and 30% Pinot Meunier, the three main grapes in Champagne. And it's been aged on lees for 36 months, so 3 years on those spent dead yeast cells. What makes Champagne different, right? So all the sparkling wine that's produced there goes through a secondary fermentation in the bottle. What does that mean? It means the still wine is first made, and then it's put in the bottle with extra yeast and sugar. The extra yeast and sugar is going to convert to more alcohol, just a bit, but what's really important is the extra carbon dioxide. So that carbon dioxide is trapped in this bottle by a crown cap and will dissolve in the wine and be trapped, and that's what gives it bubbles. And the house of Billecart-Salmon is special in Champagne because even though they're buying a lot of their own grapes, they're actually owning most of their Pinot Noir vineyards. The family that owns this winery as well has been in this business for about 7 and 8 generations. They're actually the longest lasting family-owned winery still in Champagne, as a lot of these houses are like bought by these large conglomerate companies like LVMH and so forth, right? So it's still a family operation. Why did I pick up a Magnum? First of all, obviously I love Champagne. Secondly, I think that Magnums taste better. Magnums generally age in the winery cellars for longer before they're released. And that aging on those spent yeast cells, those lees, is gonna add a little bit of more complexity to the wine. These wines will actually age longer as well if you're buying a Magnum. And I feel like there's always an occasion to be opening a Magnum, right? Even though it's just the two of you, you could open this, be drinking it while you're cooking through the day, spending the day together, and then it'd still be some wine left for dinner when dinner is ready to pair with the food. Our second wine today here is our red wine. This is our 2017 Calon-Ségur. This is a red wine coming from Bordeaux, France. So this is southwestern France. It's along the coast. Bordeaux is very historic for having these like red blends, right? So we're talking about these Cabernet Sauvignon based blends or Merlot based blends. This is specifically coming from the Medoc, and within the Medoc, it's coming from Saint-Estèphe, which is the most northern section of the Medoc. In Saint-Estèphe, it's a little bit more stony. The soil's a little thinner. So the wines are a little bit more rustic, a little bit earthy, a little bit stonier themselves, right? So Calon-Ségur is a special estate to me, obviously because of the heart for Valentine's Day, but this is one of the first Bordeaux's I ever had. Calon-Ségur was owned by this guy named the Marquis de Ségur in the 1700s, and he was one of the first people to actually own really quality estates in Bordeaux. He actually owned, along with this, Lafite, Latour, and Mouton. So those are basically 3 of the most expensive wines you could ever get. But there's a heart on this label because he says he makes wine at Lafite and Latour, but his heart is at Calon. This is a third growth in the 1855 classification. 1855 classification was when Napoleon III ordered this classification of these wines in Bordeaux, setting up this hierarchy based on their selling prices, right? So those first growths I mentioned before, Lafite, Latour, Mouton, all sell for all these really high commanding prices because of what happened in 1855. This is a third growth, so it wasn't as high and it's still not as high priced as those wines. But what makes this special is that the vineyards that are used are almost the exact same plot that was in 1855. In this wine, we have about 60% Cabernet Sauvignon, 30% Merlot, and the rest is a touch of Cabernet Franc and like 1 or 2% of Petit Verdot for balance. This wine specifically has been aged in 100% new oak for 18 months, and it's still fairly young. It's a 2017, so we are gonna have to decant this to be ready to drink for dinner later. So let's pop this open, get it in a decanter, and then we'll start everything else. We're gonna pour a taste and then decant the rest of it. Always give it a taste first before I decant it, because just in case it's bad, it's a lot more work for you to pour it from the decanter back into the bottle to return it. It's smelling really good. For this wine, we're really decanting just for aeration, so I don't need a light to get it off sediment. There shouldn't be a lot of sediment right now just because it's really young still, so just get it in the decanter. A wide belly decanter works really well for this since it's giving the most surface area to oxygen contact. And we're just gonna let this aerate while we're prepping our first course and while we're drinking our champagne. I know opening champagne is a little bit intimidating, especially a little bit more intimidating with a bigger bottle. We've seen those videos in clubs where these guys are opening these giant bottles and they just drop the whole thing and lose $1,000 worth of wine, but I'll show you how to do it. First, I like to always cut the foil off my champagne just to make sure you're getting that clean cut, because when you're using just the tabs, it might go awry and you don't want it to look ugly, right? Especially if it's Valentine's Day. You don't want to look like a chump. Next, you're gonna need a towel. Any towel works, but you're gonna have this cover the top, and you always have your thumb on this cork, because this thing's gonna fly off if you don't. And then we loosen the cage with some twists, but you wanna keep the cage on after loosening it, right? So after twisting it, you move it. Then you hold this bottle up and have it at a 45-degree angle. Some people like to just twist the bottle or just twist the cork and the bottle. I definitely do the cork and the bottle so that the label's facing the same way. And you just slowly do it and feel it come out. But you always want to be pressing the cork towards the bottle as well, so that when it does pop, it's not like a bomb, right? It should hiss just a little bit. And that's it. You lose no wine, and it's elegant. So let's get into this wine. It's a beautiful salmon-y orange, pink. Some people don't swirl their champagne. I definitely do, just because I feel like it helps me get all the aromas out of it. It will lose its carbonation faster, but I mean, I'm gonna be drinking this glass pretty quick. So on the nose, right off the bat, I'm getting a lot of these fresh, bright red berry notes, right? I'm getting this like cranberry, raspberry, slight strawberry. There's also this grapefruity, citrusy lemoniness to it. And behind that, you're getting all this complexity of those like toasted brioche kind of bready aromas from that long lees aging, that aging on the dead yeast cells, right? There's definitely like this chalky minerality to this as well. All right, let's taste this wine. This wine has those really fine bubbles. So when you're drinking it, you're actually getting this creamy texture from that. It's a little lighter bodied and it's super high acid. I'm getting so much more of that citrus and that grapefruit and lemon on the palate. It's definitely more of that tartar, cranberry, raspberry on the palate as well. But on the finish, you're getting so much of those bready, yeasty, kind of toasted brioche flavors. It's got this really complex, almost like this slight umami to it, right? There's a very slight tinge of sweetness to this. So it's not like a completely bone dry. The dosage on this is actually 9 grams a liter, so it's just a touch sweeter. But I actually prefer the slight sweetness with those red berry flavors. This is really good. So what would I pair with this champagne? Champagne, obviously gonna be very versatile. Classically, a lot of people pair their champagnes with like seafood and fried foods. And when it's a rosé, actually, it's even more versatile. For this, I would actually even make something slightly more umami. A lot of Asian flavors would work with this, even like slightly spicier food. Today, we're actually gonna be making this like little fried potato hash brown kind of pancake, and we're gonna be topping it off with a little bit of shrimp and creme fraiche. So this wine has gotten a little bit of time in the decanter, gotten to like aerate a little bit, so let's get into it. So on the nose, I'm getting this like ripe red cherry, somewhat of a black cherry, a little bit of this cassis dark blueberry. But behind that, there's all these like green flavors. So I'm talking about like this jalapeno, parsley, green bell pepper, as well as this like stony earthiness to it. And these resinous herbs like thyme, rosemary. This is a very savory wine. And that new oak is very present and upfront, so we're getting a lot of the vanilla and brown spices, so like cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, and there's also a slight black pepper to it. It's a fairly floral wine as well, so you're definitely getting some of those like dried rose petals, a little bit of violet. Wow. It's a very complex and perfumed, intense wine. Wow. This wine is still fairly young, right? So, as this medium, almost medium plus body, and the tannins are very present still from the new oak and the fairly young wine. But on the palate, I'm getting slightly more underripe fruit. I'm still getting the red fruit there, like that black cherry, some of that raspberry, and just a little bit of the cassis. But what stands out more is you're getting a lot more of those herbaceous notes, like the rosemary and thyme and that like bell pepper jalapeno. It's super stony and gravelly, like earthy. And that new oak really hits you at the end with that vanilla and that spice. This wine is definitely powerful and like long lasting. It has a very long finish to it. Fairly high acidity to it as well. This is definitely a wine that you could age for like a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades. Classically, Bordeaux, these big red wines are going to be pairing with red meats, right? So you got your beef, you could go with lamb, you could even go down to duck, because duck eats more like red meat, right? Those like sanguine notes are gonna pair really well with these red fruit, black fruits, and those herbaceous aromas. Anything with like those rosemary, thyme, like I was talking about, with the resinous herbs, are gonna pair really well with this wine as well. Another thing that works really well with this wine is red sauce based pastas, right? Like ragouts, like bolognese or something like that. Another thing is something like a firmer cheese, something that's a little bit more umami. Bordeaux cabs are super popular in China as well. So like these rich, strong flavored Chinese foods, because this is such a strong and powerful wine, will match right up with that as well. All right, let's bring the champagne back out. Starting with the champagne first, we're gonna be making these little potato pancakes topped with some creme fraiche and some fresh shrimp, just to play off the fried foods and seafoods theme for pairing with champagnes. For the red wine, for the main course, we're gonna be obviously doing a ribeye because I think ribeyes and cabs are like a match made in heaven. It's perfect for each other. For sides for that, we're gonna be doing a little bit of romesco and cauliflower, and then we're also gonna do a small pasta dish with some sun-dried tomatoes, and yeah, it's gonna be good. Ingredients for our potato pancake and shrimp dish is gonna be obviously potatoes. I have 3 potatoes here, but one of these potatoes is an extra long boy, so this is actually about 4 potatoes. And for seasonings, we have obviously salt, pepper, garlic powder. We have a couple of cloves of garlic as well, and then 1 egg, and about 2 tablespoons of flour here, just to help it bind. For garnishes, obviously we need our creme fraiche, and then we're going to be using the zest and juice of this 1 lemon, and then some chives, and then a couple of these shrimp that have been cleaned and deveined. For our main course here, obviously, star of this is these ribeye steaks. Make sure you get some that are really nice and marbled. And then for our sides, for our pasta course, I'm actually using some really nice red lentil pasta just to get a little bit more veggies in, a little bit healthier. And then for the sauce for that, we're gonna be using some sun-dried tomatoes, some cloves of garlic, 1 onion, and we're gonna be using some of this butter, and then obviously salt and pepper, right? We have some beautiful mushrooms here as well. Instead of going with the regular degular mushrooms, I got some enoki mushrooms. These are nice and thin. And then I have, on the other end of the spectrum, this big boy right here. This is a king trumpet mushroom, also known as an oyster mushroom. For greens, we have a beautiful romesco and this orange cauliflower, just to add a pop of color to it. And then for the sauce for this ribeye steak, we're gonna be using a little bit of this leftover red wine I had from another day. You might not have leftover red wine, that's fine as well. You can add a splash of whatever you're drinking if you want to. And then I'm actually using a bit of mushroom stock. Beef stock would work well as well. We have some of this Morello cherry jam, just to add a touch of this like bright fruitiness to it. A little bit of acidity as well. Build on that acidity, I have some red wine vinegar. And to add on the umami, I have soy sauce and some garlic powder. You could use fresh garlic as well to get more of that garlicky flavor. But this garlic powder is like a roasted, more umami flavor, a little bit deeper. And that's everything. First, we'll be grating our peeled potatoes on a box grater. You could also just use a normal cheese grater as well, or if you're feeling really up to it, you could just cut it up really finely. We're gonna squeeze out all the excess liquid. I use a paper towel just to make sure I'm pressing it really hard, because if it's still wet, it's not gonna fry up very nice. We're gonna grate our garlic into this as well. Season as necessary, and then add in your egg. You could choose to beat the egg first before adding it in. And then while it's incorporating, we're gonna sprinkle in the flour just enough to bind. You don't have to use all of it, or you might need some more, just depends on how much liquid you squeezed out. As for the creme fraiche that we'll be topping it with, we're gonna be zesting this entire lemon as well as using all of its juice, seasoning along the way, salt, pepper, and then set that aside. To fry the little potato pancakes, we'll be using about 2 inches of neutral oil. Here I'm using grapeseed. You could choose to use canola or vegetable as well. We're gonna get this to around 375 degrees, and then we'll be frying each side for about 3 to 5 minutes, just till it gets golden brown. And when they are done, make sure you're letting them chill on a rack so that they stay crispy, and salt them while they're still hot to make sure that salt really sticks to it. As for the shrimp, we're just going to be simply blanching them in boiling salted water. for just about a minute so they cook without shrinking and getting gummy. Make sure you're shocking them in cold water afterwards so that they stop cooking, or else they're going to carry over cook from the heat. And for our main course, I'm going to start with our pasta first. We obviously know how to cook pasta. We're going to get a large pot of boiling water, salt it really nicely, and then cook our pasta in it. And then for the sauce, we're going to start with some olive oil, sweating down our onions and garlic, and seasoning along the way. Once the onions are sweated and translucent, we'll add the sun-dried tomatoes, letting it all marry together before we add a knob of butter just to finish it all off. And then we can toss our pasta in this. For our steak, we're going to season liberally with salt and pepper on both sides. Here I press it in just to make sure it all sticks. We'll be getting our cast iron ripping hot with some grapeseed oil and basically cooking each side for about 3 minutes, making sure we get a really nice sear. As all this is happening and the steak's in the pan, I'll be getting our vegetables in the oven. I'm just going to season our Romanesco and our cauliflower with some olive oil with some salt and pepper, throwing it in for about 15 minutes at 400 degrees Fahrenheit. When the steaks are done, we're going to pull them and let them rest on the rack. Using the same exact pan, we'll be cooking our mushrooms with just some butter. Once those have a nice sear as well, we're going to let it rest on the rack as well. To finish off, using the same exact pan, we'll be making our sauce. We're just throwing in the cherry jam, the soy sauce, red wine vinegar, and some of that leftover red wine that we have from another night, seasoning along the way with salt, pepper, and garlic powder. Once it's reduced about halfway, we're going to be adding a cold knob of butter and making sure that it incorporates. It's going to add some of that body and lusciousness to the sauce. Now that everything's ready, we're ready to torch the steak just to reheat it a bit, as well as adding some of those charred smoky flavors to it, and everything's ready to plate. I'm ready. Get some steak first. Wow, that sauce is so good. So that ribeye with the Bordeaux and that cherry kind of soy sauce is so good together. You got the umami, you got the sweetness, you got that bright red cherry. It pairs right with the savory and like fruit-driven qualities of this wine. Everything together is just perfect together, right? We got these earthy mushrooms over here. And it's really hitting on those stony, gravelly like qualities of the salty stuff that you're expecting. And then everything else is obviously just a side. But our little potato pancakes with our shrimp and lemon creme fraiche. The fried potato that's kind of oily, the high acid from the champagne, and that creamy texture that you get on the finish is pairing perfectly with that creme fraiche. And there's a slight sweetness from the shrimp that goes really well with the rosé qualities. All right, so that's it for us today. There's a lot of food to eat. There's a lot of wine to drink. So we'll catch you next time. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We'll be doing a lot more of these.